Imagine a world where one man outsmarts both law enforcement and rival drug lords to control an empire spanning 21 states. A man who vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and a criminal legacy. This is the story of Frank Matthews, the elusive Black Godfather. The narrative unfolds, taking us through Matthews's early life in Durham, North Carolina, to his rise as a kingpin in New York's drug trade. The allure of wealth and power, the sophistication of his operations, and the mystery surrounding his eventual disappearance make for a compelling story. Frank Matthews's earliest memories were of the bustling streets and towering brick buildings that defined Durham's Black Wall Street. This thriving African-American community, home to a prosperous middle class and successful Black-owned businesses, stood in stark contrast to the racial segregation and economic marginalization experienced by many of its counterparts across the American South. As a young boy, Matthews was captivated by the neighborhood's energy and promise. Vibrant storefronts, filled with the aromas of spices and the sounds of lively conversation, created the impression of a self-sustaining world. Residents took great pride in their community, which had risen from the ashes of the 1898 Wilmington insurrection and the subsequent destruction of the original Black Wall Street in the early 20th century. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic enclave, young Matthews couldn't help but notice the tensions and inequities that continued to shape the lives of Durham's African-American population. While the neighborhood thrived, the specter of racial discrimination and limited economic opportunities loomed large. Matthews witnessed firsthand the barriers his family and neighbors faced in achieving true prosperity and social mobility. It was against this backdrop that Matthews' own path toward a life of crime began to take shape. As a teenager, he fell in with a group of petty thieves and small-time hustlers, drawn to the allure of easy money and the thrill of evading the law. His first brush with the criminal justice system came at the age of 15, when he was arrested for stealing chickens from a local farm. This minor offense, while seemingly innocuous, would foreshadow the more serious misdeeds that were to come. Matthews's early criminal activities, while not yet indicative of the ruthless drug kingpin he would one day become, nevertheless reflected a growing disillusionment with the limited options available to him as a young Black man in the segregated South. The promise of wealth and power, however fleeting, proved a powerful temptation, especially in the face of the systemic barriers that constrained the aspirations of his peers. As Matthews moved into his late teens, his involvement in criminal enterprises deepened. He began to establish connections with more seasoned offenders, learning the ins and outs of the local underground economy. Petty theft gave way to more sophisticated scams and the occasional burglary, all while Matthews maintained a veneer of respectability, completing his high school education and even enrolling in a vocational training program. Yet, the allure of the criminal lifestyle proved too strong to resist. Matthews' ambition and entrepreneurial spirit, coupled with a growing sense of resentment toward the societal barriers that constrained his opportunities, drove him to make a fateful decision. He would leave Durham behind and seek his fortune in the bustling metropolis of New York City, the epicenter of the nation's burgeoning drug trade. The decision to depart his hometown was not an easy one for Matthews. Durham's Black Wall Street had been the only world he had ever known, a place where he and his family had found a measure of stability and community in the face of widespread racial oppression. However, the promise of a fresh start and the potential to amass wealth and power proved too enticing to ignore. In the summer of 1969, just shy of his 20th birthday, Frank Matthews bid farewell to Durham and set out on a journey that would ultimately transform him into one of the most powerful and enigmatic drug kingpins in American history. The streets of New York City, with their gritty allure and boundless criminal opportunities, would become the backdrop for Matthew's remarkable rise and the beginning of a legacy that would endure long after his mysterious disappearance. As Matthews left the familiar confines of Durham behind, he carried with him a mix of ambition, resentment, and a hunger for the power and status that had eluded him in his hometown. The young man, who had once been content with petty thievery, now had his sights set on a far grander prize: the chance to build a criminal empire that would secure his place in the annals of American crime. The story of Frank Matthews' genesis, from a small-time criminal in the segregated South to a drug lord of unprecedented reach and notoriety, would become a cautionary tale of the lure of illicit wealth and the consequences of unchecked ambition. But in that fateful summer of 1969, as Matthews boarded a bus bound for New York City, he could scarcely have imagined the extraordinary heights he would one day reach, or the enduring mystery that would surround his eventual downfall. Frank Matthews' journey from the thriving African-American community of Durham, North Carolina, to the bustling streets of New York City marked a pivotal turning point in his life. With a growing criminal record and a hunger for power, the young man left his humble roots behind, determined to forge a new path in the big city. Upon arriving in New York in the early 1960s, Matthews quickly found that his small-town skills were no match for the cutthroat realities of the urban underworld. He struggled to gain a foothold, scraping by with petty theft and occasional burglaries. The allure of the drug trade, however, soon became impossible to ignore. Matthews' first major break came when he made the acquaintance of a group of heroin traffickers with ties to the notorious French Connection. These seasoned criminals recognized the young man's ambition and street smarts, and they offered him an opportunity to get involved in the lucrative drug pipeline stretching from Europe to the United States. Eager to prove himself, Matthews threw himself into the new venture. He quickly demonstrated a knack for logistics, forging connections with distributors and establishing a network of mules to smuggle the heroin into the country. His attention to detail and willingness to take calculated risks soon earned him the respect of his new associates. As Matthews' role within the organization expanded, so too did his ambitions. He began to envision a future where he would be the one calling the shots, rather than simply following orders. With a keen eye for opportunity and an uncompromising drive, he carefully plotted his ascent through the ranks. The young drug trafficker's big break came in the late 1960s when one of the French Connection's top lieutenants was arrested. Matthews seized the moment, using his connections and business acumen to position himself as the logical successor. His ability to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries within the criminal underworld allowed him to outmaneuver his competitors. Within a few short years, Matthews had consolidated his control over the heroin trade in New York City. He established a sophisticated distribution network that extended across state lines, with trusted lieutenants overseeing operations in key markets. The scale and efficiency of his organization quickly made him a force to be reckoned with. As Matthews' power and wealth grew, so too did his public profile. He began to cultivate a larger-than-life persona, earning the moniker the Black Godfather among those in the know. His lavish parties and ostentatious displays of wealth became the stuff of legend, drawing admiration from some and envy from others. Yet Matthews' rise to the top was not without its challenges. He faced constant threats from rival drug lords, each vying for a piece of the lucrative market. Brutal turf wars erupted, with Matthews proving ruthless in his determination to maintain his dominance. law enforcement agencies too began to take notice of the growing criminal empire. Despite the risks, Matthews remained undaunted. He surrounded himself with a trusted inner circle, employing sophisticated counter-surveillance techniques to stay one step ahead of the authorities. His ability to evade detection and anticipate the moves of his adversaries only added to his mystique. As the 1970s dawned, Frank Matthews had firmly established himself as one of the most powerful drug kingpins in the United States. His reach extended far beyond the borders of New York, with his organization controlling a vast network of heroin distribution across 21 states. The young man from Durham had become a force to be reckoned with, a criminal mastermind who had built an empire on the backs of the addicted. Yet, even as Matthews' power and wealth continued to grow, the foundations of his criminal empire were beginning to crack. The relentless pursuit of law enforcement, coupled with the ever-present threat of betrayal from within his own ranks, would soon set the stage for his dramatic downfall. The rise of the Black Godfather was nearing its end, and the final chapter of his story was about to unfold. As Frank Matthews cemented his foothold in the New York drug trade, his ambition and ruthless business acumen knew no bounds. Leveraging the connections he had forged with the French Connection, Matthews rapidly expanded his operations, establishing a vast network that stretched across 21 states. His ability to outmaneuver rivals and evade law enforcement soon earned him the moniker the Black Godfather, a testament to the sheer scale and audacity of his criminal enterprise. Matthews' rise to power was marked by a strategic and calculated approach. Unlike many of his contemporaries who relied on brute force and intimidation, he preferred to operate with a level of sophistication and finesse. He carefully cultivated relationships with key players in the drug trade, forging alliances and strategic partnerships that allowed him to control the flow of heroin and cocaine into major urban markets. One of Matthews' most significant achievements was his ability to streamline the importation process. By establishing direct connections with suppliers in Europe, he was able to bypass the traditional distribution channels and bring in massive quantities of drugs at a fraction of the cost. This gave him a significant advantage over his rivals, who were often forced to rely on less reliable and more expensive sources. Frank was a true businessman at heart, recalled one of his former associates, who spoke on the condition of anonymity. He didn't just want to be a drug dealer, he wanted to be a drug lord. He had a vision, and he executed it with precision and ruthlessness. As Matthews' empire grew, so too did his reputation. He cultivated an air of mystery and power, carefully curating his public image as the Black Godfather. This persona allowed him to command respect and loyalty from his subordinates, who were drawn to his aura of success and invincibility. When Frank walked into a room, everyone knew who he was, said a former DEA agent who had been involved in the manhunt for Matthews. He had this presence, this charisma, that just commanded attention. He wasn't just a drug dealer, he was a force to be reckoned with. Matthews' ability to evade law enforcement was equally impressive. He had a keen understanding of the inner workings of the criminal justice system and was adept at anticipating the moves of the police and federal agents who were pursuing him. He employed a network of informants and moles within law enforcement to stay one step ahead, and he was known to change his patterns and routines on a moment's notice to avoid detection. "He was always 3 moves ahead of us," the former DEA agent lamented. "We'd think we had him cornered, and then he'd just disappear. It was incredibly frustrating, but you had to respect the way he operated." As Matthews' empire continued to grow, so too did the scale of his operations. He oversaw a vast network of drug importation, distribution, and money laundering that spanned the country. His organization was a well-oiled machine, with each member playing a specific role and adhering to a strict code of conduct. Frank was a master at compartmentalizing his business, explained a former associate who had worked closely with Matthews. He knew that the key to his success was maintaining a tight grip on every aspect of the operation. He had eyes and ears everywhere, and he demanded absolute loyalty from his people. Despite the immense wealth and power that Matthews had amassed, he remained largely elusive and enigmatic. He carefully cultivated an air of mystery, rarely granting interviews or making public appearances. This only added to his mystique and further cemented his reputation as the Black Godfather, a shadowy figure who wielded an outsized influence over the criminal underworld. Frank Matthews was a legend in his own time. The former DEA agent reflected, "He was like a ghost, constantly slipping through our fingers." And the fact that he was able to build such a vast and successful criminal empire, all while maintaining this aura of invincibility, is truly remarkable. As the 1970s wore on, Matthews' empire continued to grow, and his influence expanded far beyond the confines of the drug trade. He had forged connections with politicians, law enforcement officials, and even members of the legitimate business community, using his wealth and power to exert control over a vast swath of the urban landscape. He was like a modern-day Al Capone, the former associate said. He had his fingers in so many pies, it was almost impossible to keep track of all his activities, and he was always one step ahead of everyone else. Yet, despite the scale of his operations and the wealth he had amassed, Matthews remained driven by a relentless ambition and a hunger for power that knew no bounds. He was constantly seeking to expand his empire, to solidify his position as the undisputed king of the drug trade. Frank was never satisfied, the former DEA agent said. He was always looking for the next opportunity, the next way to increase his power and influence, and that's what ultimately led to his downfall. As Matthews' reign as the Black Godfather reached its apex, the stage was set for a dramatic showdown that would bring his criminal empire crashing down and thrust him into the annals of American crime history. As Frank Matthews' drug empire continued to expand across the country, his lavish lifestyle reached new heights, cementing his reputation as the Black Godfather of the underworld. With an estimated $100 million fortune at his fingertips, Matthews indulged in a world of extravagance that few could have imagined. At the heart of Matthews' opulent existence was his sprawling mansion in Staten Island, New York. The estate, which he had purchased in cash, stood as a testament to his remarkable rise from a small-time Durham thief to one of the most powerful drug kingpins in America. The grand three-story residence was a far cry from the modest homes of his childhood in Black Wall Street. Adorned with the finest furnishings and artwork, the mansion was a veritable palace, complete with a private movie theater, a lavish indoor pool, and a state-of-the-art security system. Matthews' love of luxury cars was also on full display, with a fleet of gleaming Cadillacs, Lincolns, and Rolls-Royces lining the circular driveway. When Frank Matthews rolled up, it was like the president was coming, recalled one former associate. He always had a small entourage with him, and they were all dressed to the nines. You couldn't help but be impressed by the sheer scale of his wealth and power. Matthews' extravagant parties at the Staten Island estate were the stuff of legend, drawing in a who's who of the criminal underworld, as well as a smattering of high-profile celebrities and socialites. These lavish affairs were carefully curated, with Matthews ensuring that every detail, from the catering to the entertainment, was executed to perfection. It was like stepping into a different world, said one attendee. The champagne was flowing, the music was thumping, and there were beautiful women everywhere you looked. Frank had an eye for style and a flair for the dramatic. He wanted to be seen as a success story, not just another drug dealer. While Matthews cultivated an image of wealth and power, his personal life was more complex. He maintained a series of long-term relationships with several women, some of whom were rumored to be involved in his criminal enterprises. However, Matthews was also known to be a devoted father, doting on his two young children and ensuring they were shielded from the darker aspects of his lifestyle. Frank was a complicated guy, remarked a former associate. He had this public persona as the Black Godfather, but behind closed doors, he was very protective of his family. He wanted his kids to have the kind of life he never had growing up. Despite his efforts to maintain a veneer of respectability, Matthews' lavish displays of wealth and power did not go unnoticed by law enforcement. As his criminal empire continued to expand, the DEA and other agencies intensified their efforts to bring him down, recognizing the threat he posed to the social fabric of urban communities. Matthews was a master at evading detection, said one former DEA agent. He had a network of informants and a knack for anticipating our moves. But we knew that the bigger he got, the harder he would fall. It was just a matter of time before we caught up with him. As the noose began to tighten around Matthews' criminal enterprise, he continued to live life on his own terms, reveling in the spoils of his ill-gotten gains. His extravagant lifestyle, however, would ultimately prove to be his undoing, as it drew the attention of not only law enforcement, but also his rivals within the drug trade. The stage was set for Matthews' downfall, as the once untouchable drug lord found himself confronted with the consequences of his ambition and the thin line between success and exposure. The final chapter of the Black Godfather's reign was about to unfold, forever etching his name in the annals of American crime history. As the 1970s wore on, Frank Matthews' drug empire had grown to unprecedented heights. His operations spanned 21 states, and his estimated fortune of $100 million had made him one of the most powerful and elusive figures in the American underworld. However, the very success that had fueled his lavish lifestyle would ultimately lead to his downfall. In the spring of 1973, Matthews' luck began to run out. Law enforcement agencies, including the DEA and US Marshals, had been closing in on the Black Godfather for some time, determined to bring down his sprawling criminal enterprise. Their efforts finally paid off when they received a credible tip about Matthews' whereabouts in Las Vegas. On a warm June evening, as Matthews was enjoying a night out at the Flamingo Hotel and Casino, federal agents moved in to make the arrest. The scene unfolded in dramatic fashion, with Matthews initially attempting to flee before being apprehended in the hotel's lobby. Witnesses reported a tense standoff as the agents wrestled the powerful drug lord to the ground, finally subduing him after a brief struggle. "It was like something out of a movie," recalled one bystander who had been present that night. One minute, this guy was living large, surrounded by his entourage, and the next, he was being tackled by a swarm of federal agents. You could tell he was used to being the one in control, but in that moment, he was completely powerless. Matthews was charged with a litany of federal drug trafficking offenses, including conspiracy, distribution, and money laundering. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and it seemed that the reign of the Black Godfather was finally coming to an end. However, in a twist that would only add to the legend surrounding Matthews, the drug kingpin managed to orchestrate a stunning escape from justice. While awaiting trial in a Las Vegas jail, Matthews was granted a temporary release on bail, a move that would prove to be a fateful decision. On the day of his scheduled court appearance, the defendant simply never showed up. Authorities frantically searched the area, but Matthews had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a stunned law enforcement community. "We thought we had him," said one DEA agent who had worked on the case. "He was finally in our grasp, and then he just slipped through our fingers." It was infuriating, but also deeply unsettling. How could someone with that kind of reach and resources just disappear like that? In the aftermath of Matthews' disappearance, a flurry of speculation and theories emerged. Some believed he had fled the country, perhaps to Africa or South America, where he could potentially hide out and continue his criminal activities. Others speculated that he had been silenced by former associates or rivals who saw him as a liability. Even his own family members expressed shock and confusion, insisting they had no knowledge of his whereabouts. The sudden and mysterious vanishing act only added to Matthews's growing legend. Law enforcement agencies, including the DEA and US Marshals, launched a massive manhunt, scouring the country and even expanding their search internationally. Yet despite their best efforts, the elusive drug Kingpin remained one step ahead, evading capture and leaving investigators stumped. As the search dragged on for weeks and then months, the case began to take on an almost mythical quality. Matthews' ability to disappear so completely, even in the face of overwhelming evidence and a concerted law enforcement effort, only fueled the public's fascination with his story. He had become the ultimate criminal enigma, a ghost who had managed to slip through the cracks of the justice system. "It was like he just vanished into thin air," said one US Marshal involved in the manhunt. "We'd get a lead, chase it down, and then it would just dry up." It was enormously frustrating, but also kind of awe-inspiring. This guy had managed to build an empire, amass a fortune, and then just disappear. You had to respect the sheer audacity of it, even if it was maddening. The disappearance of Frank Matthews sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld and law enforcement community alike. His ability to evade capture, even in the face of mounting evidence and a determined pursuit, only added to the legend surrounding the Black Godfather. As the search continued, the mystery of his whereabouts would captivate the public's imagination for decades to come, cementing Matthews' place as one of the most elusive and fascinating figures in American criminal history. The disappearance of Frank Matthews in 1973 sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld and law enforcement agencies alike. The once mighty drug kingpin had seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a relentless manhunt that would span decades. In the immediate aftermath of Matthews' arrest and release on bail in Las Vegas, the DEA and US Marshals launched a coordinated effort to track him down. Agents swarmed his known haunts and safe houses, interrogated his associates, and scoured the country for any sign of the elusive fugitive. But Matthews had seemingly vanished without a trace, evading even the most seasoned investigators. It was like he just disappeared off the face of the earth, recalled former DEA agent Michael Harrigan, who was part of the initial task force assembled to hunt down Matthews. We had him dead to rights, and then he just slipped away. It was the most frustrating case I've ever worked on. The manhunt quickly expanded beyond the borders of the United States as federal authorities alerted international law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for Matthews. Interpol issued a global alert, and the US Marshals Service even sent agents to scour the streets of major cities in the Caribbean and Latin America, chasing down leads and rumors. We had informants telling us he was in Jamaica, in Brazil, in Nigeria, said Harrigan. Every time we thought we were close, it turned out to be a dead end. Matthews was just too good at covering his tracks. As the search dragged on with no tangible progress, the frustration within the law enforcement community only grew. Agents were torn between their determination to bring Matthews to justice and the nagging feeling that they were chasing a ghost. It was maddening, recalled U.S. Marshal James Simmons, who joined the manhunt in the late 1970s. We get these tips that sounded promising, only to find out they were completely bogus. Matthews had built this network of loyal associates who were willing to go to great lengths to protect him. It was like he had vanished into thin air. The lack of concrete leads and the passage of time began to take a toll on the investigators' morale. Some began to wonder if Matthews had indeed managed to escape the country and start a new life somewhere abroad, while others clung to the hope that he had met a violent end at the hands of rivals or former associates. There were times when we all just felt like we were spinning our wheels, Simmons admitted. You start to second-guess yourself, wonder if you're missing something obvious. But we couldn't give up. Not on a case like this. As the search continued, the legend of Frank Matthews only grew. Whispers and rumors swirled through the criminal underworld, with some believing he was living in luxury in a remote corner of the world, while others speculated that he had been killed to prevent him from testifying against his former associates. Matthews had become this mythical figure, this ghost that everyone was chasing, said Harrigan. The longer he remained at large, the more his reputation grew. He became this symbol of the ultimate criminal mastermind, the guy who could just disappear and evade justice. The ongoing manhunt put a significant strain on the resources and morale of the DEA and U.S. Marshals Service. Agents were pulled from other cases to join the hunt, and the costs of the investigation continued to mount with each dead end. It was a massive drain on our resources, Simmons acknowledged. We had agents working around the clock, following up on every possible lead, and it felt like we were getting nowhere. But we couldn't just give up, not on a case of this magnitude. As the years turned into decades, the search for Frank Matthews began to take on a mythic quality. The case became a source of fascination for true crime enthusiasts and a symbol of the challenges faced by law enforcement in combating large-scale drug operations. Matthews' disappearance became this enduring mystery that just captivated people, said Harrigan. There's something about the idea of this criminal mastermind who just vanished that really captures the public's imagination. It's the ultimate unsolved crime, and it's one that we're still trying to crack all these years later. Despite the passage of time and the countless dead ends, the investigators assigned to the Matthews case remained determined to uncover the truth. They continued to follow up on new leads, interview former associates, and explore every possible avenue in their quest to find the elusive drug kingpin. We owe it to the victims, to the communities that were devastated by Matthews' drug empire, to keep searching, said Simmons. Even if it takes the rest of my career, I'm not going to stop until we find out what really happened to him. This case has become a part of who I am. As the hunt for Frank Matthews drags on, the enduring mystery and fascination surrounding his disappearance only seem to deepen. The search has become a testament to the dogged determination of law enforcement, as well as a cautionary tale about the consequences of the drug trade and the power of criminal evasion. Frank Matthews may have vanished, but his legacy lives on, Harrigan reflected. His story is a reminder that even the most powerful criminals can't escape justice forever. We may not have caught him, but we're still chasing that ghost, and we're not going to stop until we find out the truth. Frank Matthews' enduring impact on organized crime in America cannot be overstated. Though he has been labeled the forgotten drug kingpin, his legacy continues to reverberate through the criminal underworld and the annals of law enforcement history. Matthews' ability to build a vast drug empire from the ground up, amassing a fortune estimated at over $100 million, served as a blueprint for future generations of drug traffickers. His innovative tactics and ability to outmaneuver both rivals and law enforcement set a new standard for the scale and sophistication of drug operations in the United States. The routes and methods Matthews established for importing heroin from the French Connection in Europe became a model for subsequent drug trafficking organizations. His extensive network of distribution hubs across 21 states demonstrated a level of coordination and control that was unprecedented at the time. Law enforcement agencies, including the DEA and U.S. Marshals, were left scrambling to keep up with the sheer scope of Matthews' operations. Even decades after his mysterious disappearance, the name Frank Matthews continues to carry weight in the criminal underworld. His ability to evade capture for so long has only added to his legend, with his story becoming a source of inspiration and aspiration for those seeking to emulate his success in the drug trade. Matthews was a true visionary in the world of organized crime, said retired DEA agent Michael Levine. He saw opportunities where others saw only risk, and he was willing to take bold moves to expand his empire. That kind of entrepreneurial spirit, coupled with his ruthless efficiency, made him a force to be reckoned with. The cultural impact of Frank Matthews' story has been equally profound. References to the Black Godfather have appeared in numerous works of fiction, from novels to television shows and films. His lavish lifestyle and the air of mystery surrounding his disappearance have captivated audiences, serving as a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked ambition and the pursuit of wealth through illicit means. There's just something about Matthews' story that captures the public imagination, said true crime author Sarah Benson. He was this larger-than-life figure who seemed to defy the odds, amassing an incredible fortune and eluding law enforcement for years. Even though he's been gone for decades, people are still fascinated by the question of what happened to him. The lessons learned from the Matthews case have had a lasting impact on law enforcement's approach to combating drug trafficking organizations. The inability of the DEA and U.S. Marshals to apprehend Matthews, despite their best efforts, highlighted the need for more sophisticated investigative techniques, improved intelligence sharing, and greater coordination between federal, state, and local agencies. The Matthews case was a wake-up call for us, said former U.S. Marshal David Rosen. It showed that we needed to be more proactive, more innovative, and more collaborative in our efforts to take down these large-scale drug operations. We learned a lot of hard lessons, but it ultimately made us better equipped to tackle the challenges of the modern drug trade. In the years since Matthews' disappearance, law enforcement has made significant strides in dismantling drug trafficking networks, employing advanced surveillance methods, financial investigations, and international cooperation to disrupt the flow of narcotics into the United States. However, the enduring mystery surrounding Matthews' fate continues to haunt those who have dedicated their careers to unraveling the secrets of the criminal underworld. The mystery surrounding Frank Matthews' fate continues to intrigue both law enforcement and the public, said Levine, the retired DEA agent. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the complexities and consequences of the criminal underworld. As we reflect on the legacy of Frank Matthews, we're reminded of the ongoing challenges in combating drug trafficking and organized crime. His story, with its blend of ambition, power, and evasion, remains a captivating chapter in American criminal history. The enduring fascination with Matthews' story highlights our collective interest in unsolved mysteries, said Benson, the true crime author. It's a testament to the human desire to unravel the unknown even decades after the events transpired. If you found this exploration of Frank Matthews' life and legacy intriguing, we encourage you to delve deeper into the world of true crime and historical mysteries. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from the annals of criminal history. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us continue to bring these captivating stories to light. Share this video with friends and family who appreciate a good mystery. Frank Matthews' story is sure to spark interesting discussions. Together, we can keep the conversation going and perhaps one day uncover the truth behind the disappearance of America's forgotten drug kingpin.